Washington and the media have been chattering all weekend, well, actually, really for weeks on end, about the dismal unemployment situation and numbers across the country. Seems like a lot of people are not going back to work and living on unemployment benefits instead. And I feel like it really dovetails somewhat nicely, somewhat grossly with like the she-session narrative that has sort of been churning for the past couple of months. The effect of the pandemic, COVID-19, on women in the workplace. Liz, could you sort of unpack the she-session narrative, like what it is and what it is not?
Yeah, it's been a big media narrative since the start of this pandemic because in the very beginning, women did lose more jobs than men did. And but it's persisted, and up until just as recently as February, you had Kamala Harris calling it a national emergency. You have all these very dire headlines saying that this is going to devastate a generation of working women, and I think that a lot of that is very overblown. From the beginning, even though women were losing more jobs, if you the unemployment numbers or the loss in labor force participation, the difference was about 1 percentage point or less in all of these cases. And by this point, it's actually caught back up. And you have for April 2021, women's unemployment was 5.6% and men's was 6.1%. You also have some rebound in the labor force participation rate, which is, how many people are actually working compared to February 2020. And women's has actually recovered more than men's has. Now, there are women at a lower labor force participation rate to begin with, but they've also seen more recovery since last fall.
What
or
was
since
the
last
reason
spring
for
when
the
the
initial
pandemic started.
decline and women being hit harder by the pandemic? What about COVID-19 was different than like the Walmart, I'm sorry, not the Walmart, the Wall Street crash of 2008?
Right. So I think there's a couple different things at play here. One of them was women tend to be they work in more like service sector jobs and those kinds of things where that one got closed down more and two, they may have felt a lot less safe going out, particularly when we didn't know really what to expect from COVID at the beginning of the pandemic. The other part is really not so much about women as it is about parenting. School shut down, kids were out of school. There was a lot more of a virtual school, homeschool type thing. And women still overwhelmingly do the majority of childcare. And so when kids were coming back home, women overwhelmingly were the ones who were deciding that they were going to stay home, which to one degree, as long as it's a choice, I think it's a good thing. But I think there might be some question there of to what degree that is a choice.
And I think that's, when I hear you say that, I immediately go, women decided to stay home and help their kids through this unprecedented experiment in home learning where kids are suffering, they're sad, and they're isolated. And the media is talking about it like it's a bad thing that the mothers are coming back to help take care of the children. And I go like, that's wrong. That doesn't feel right to me. It's about choice.
It's about choice. And it's certainly, I think it's a good thing if both parents are able to help their kids through this type of thing.
Depends who makes more money, though. Like
it depends on who makes more money.
Who has the higher salary and should be working and can keep the whole ship afloat while everyone's stuck at home.
Which comes back to, again, like when we talk about the wage gap, you knew I was going to bring it up. When we talk about the wage gap, what we often overlook is that prior to marriage, at least for millennials, a lot of times women make more than men. It's really a childbearing pregnancy gap. So that's kind of, we do see a little bit of an impact there as well. I'm sure Elizabeth has more she'd like to add here, but it's kind of both. I think a lot of that, though, is because we haven't seen flexibility in the workplace. And what the pandemic has absolutely shown us is that you can be very productive and work from home and on a flexible schedule. So I think we're actually going to see some benefits around that.
Yeah, I agree that that's a very good thing. And one of the things that's crazy is that you hear a lot of people, especially the Biden administration and Democrats, saying that in order to deal with this supposed crisis of working women, we need to do all of these things, which pretty much just amount to pass all of the Democrats' preferred economic policies, when the causes, as Kat just laid out, are all things that are temporary. Whether we're talking about women being in more service jobs and losing those because of shutdowns and things like that, or we're talking about, having to drop out temporarily to care for family and children or relatives. Those are all products of the pandemic that should just course correct naturally when the pandemic is over.
Yeah, I think there was a study that came out from the McKinsey Fund, Women in Workplace study. They found that 1 in 4 women dropped out of the workforce in the past year. And the coverage of this has been that, like, it's going to amount to a couple of million that do not go back to work after this whole thing is done. Women are quitting work. And the narrative on that has been that that is the defeat. Not like women are rediscovering like different things that make them happy, like what do women actually want? Just they need to be working and they need to be an equal representation in the workplace for everything to be okay, for society to be healthy. And I just read that and I just don't, that doesn't feel sincere or right to me. That feels like it's just about box checking and counting numbers rather than being like, are women happy and do they want to be working?
Right. And I think you're getting to the crux of the issue here, right? Because I think when you box check, we don't really know the story of what's happening behind those numbers. And if women are not returning to the workforce because they've spent the last year at home with their kids, maybe homeschooling, maybe finding other methods that work better for them, and they realize that they like this better, that's actually a good thing. We should want men as well to be able to find more flexible work that makes them happy. It's not going out and going to an office place is not the end all be all, right? But then if there are women who are feeling forced into that, who are not able to return to the workplace when they otherwise would, I think that's a different story. And so when we just focus on the just core numbers and nothing else, just checking those boxes of who's going back into the workforce and who isn't, we miss that story.
Yeah, Liz, is there anything else to unpack about the whole subject of flexibility and how that has sort of been discovered, both for moms and dads, and then where that's going to go? Do you think that there's going to be a snapback towards really rigid work and home lives like we had before?
It's really hard to say because we've been predicting that we should go towards more homework, people working from home for like over a decade now, and it hasn't happened. So hopefully the pandemic is actually going to kickstart that, because we have seen, we've done a massive experiment in it, and we've seen that there haven't been these productivity losses that people sometimes predict. And that could be really good for women too, because when it does come to flexible work, women are more likely to take it, and working moms are more likely to take it, which, even though it's offered, may end up penalizing them if employers think like, oh, they're going to do this and it's not, it's not normalized. So now that it's become more normalized, I think that could be better and just sort of help with the perception of women who do want to work flexible hours or work from home more.
Yeah, I think this is a really important point too, because a lot of what we've seen the Democrats proposing in terms of getting women back to work is childcare subsidies and things like that. And that's not actually what women overwhelmingly want. What they want is to be able to work and to stay home with their kids to some degree. I'm sure a lot of men would like that as well. And we're just erasing those options. I think that, the vast majority of American workers are saying that they've liked the flexibility over the past year and a half, and they would like to keep that. The only issue is whether these employers are going to realize, hey, the fact that we've had a very productive year, the markets are doing great, right? Whether they realize that means that, okay, we should be able to keep this flexibility, or if they're going to go back to these tired old tropes of you need to be 9 to 5 sitting at this desk and we don't care what you actually produce.
Yeah. I was reading a commentary last week, and it was about like the whole debate over daycare and childcare and subsidizing it and pumping more government dollars, or your dollars and taxes, into making childcare more affordable, which will eventually inflate the cost inevitably. And it feels like all of those proposals are coming from like the Elizabeth Warrens of the world, multiple degrees, full-time worker, and those kinds of women are the ones who are shaping the feminist discussion in Washington about what women in America want. And Liz said something about like women are more likely to choose to actually leave and stay at home and do those things. And it just makes me wonder, like, what do women want in that context? And clearly they are different from men if they are choosing different things, right?
I think it depends. I think there are certainly pushes, and there's certainly, to some extent, men aren't given those same choices. Even we know that within the U.S., maternity leave is not super common compared to other countries, but paternity leave is even less common. That kind of flexibility often isn't offered to men. So I think that's at play here. But certainly, like, that choice is so important. And overwhelmingly, women want flexibility, and it's not necessarily about wanting to work part-time even. They might want to work full-time, but they want to work full-time around their schedules, and they might even be more productive and better workers if they're allowed to work full-time around their schedules, rather than having to fit it all into this box of like, between this bell and this bell, you sit here.
Yeah, I think more women and men. I mean, I think more parents in general would like to be able to have more time with their children. And, to the extent that we encourage that, that's good. One of the big things that's different about libertarian feminism from, a lot of strains of feminism is that we don't think that there should be like one ideal vision of what women should be doing or families should be doing or what anybody should be doing. Like it's all about individual choices, and we just want to like have policies that help people create to have the most choices and create their own version of the good life for themselves.